Hello and welcome to the Modern Digital Enterprise, the digital transformation podcast from Anexinet, part of the Anexinet podcast network. Today we've got another ETC Roundtable discussion for you, and if you are not familiar, that is the Emerging Technology Council, run by Senior Digital Strategist Glenn Gruber and Maribel Lopez of Lopez Research. Today, Glenn and the strategists put together their prescriptions for 2020, and they've got plenty to talk about. Senior digital strategist James Hoshor is going to talk about using AI and analytics to improve customer experiences. Senior digital strategist Nitin Bhatia will present a pragmatic approach to blockchain. Senior digital strategist Bob Noren will talk about supercharging your IoT efforts with 5G. VP of Enterprise Architecture Steve Tranchida is going to talk about adopting an event-driven architecture. And lastly, Senior Digital Strategist Glenn Gruber will be talking about refreshing your existing mobile apps, how to use AI superpowers for good and not evil, and investing in intelligent automation. So without further ado, I will let them take it away right after this.
As a leading technology consultancy and reseller, Anexinet helps clients provide a complete digital experience for customers, employees, and end users. We accomplish this through our holistic approach, which encompasses all aspects of today's digital journey, end-to-end. Anexinet partners with top technology vendors like HPE to offer products and services that enhance the digital experience across customer engagement, enterprise mobility, cloud and hybrid IT, and analytics, because great digital experiences rely on the smooth operation of all interconnected elements. From strategy through execution, we deliver custom multi-channel applications, including web, mobile, chat, and voice. With self-service apps for customer loyalty and enterprise apps that streamline internal processes, now you can reimagine legacy applications to propel your business forward. Anexinet also helps you embrace modern cloud and hybrid IT infrastructure to provide a seamless experience at every touchpoint, empowering you to recover quickly from disaster, scale to meet demand, and automate systems for perfect performance 24/7. And to maximize your competitive advantage, we ensure you always deliver the best experience possible by continuously honing your digital solutions through data-driven insights. So, how do you know if your business has what it takes to provide the complete digital experience? One that sets you apart, maintains competitive edge, and turns users into passionate fans? Simple. Just give us a call. Together, we can deepen engagement and make every digital experience remarkable.
Welcome to the first roundtable of the year, and we're going to kick this one off with our prescriptions for 2020 for the coming year. This, for me, is one of the more interesting roundtables that we do because we cover so many different topics. And also, I think it's one of the more practical that we do because unlike where we talk generically about predictions that are of things that are going to happen in the future, which are often wrong to be honest. We're really focused more on the practical of what are the things that you should be doing if you're not already this coming year. So it's a little bit more focused to try and give you guys some ideas to take some action on. For anyone who's new, the ETC, one of the great things is that this is an opportunity for folks in similar roles to have a chance to share ideas and learnings with each other, and also to draw on the insights of others when you've got a problem or an issue that you're trying to tackle. What we're going to do is really get right into the prescriptions right now. We've got 7, I think, really good topics that we're going to go through. We've got different contributors from the Anexinet team to help with this based on our own personal experiences, our experiences with clients, and what we're seeing out in the market. So the first one's going to be on using AI and analytics to improve your customer experience. And the person who's going to lead us off is James Hoshor. He's one of the senior digital strategists at Anexinet. James, why don't you take it away?
All right, great. Thanks, Glenn. Thanks for everybody for joining us. As Glenn mentioned, this is a hot topic, which is why we wanted to include it for this year's prescription. So as strategists, we're working with a lot of different clients across multiple industries, and one of the top objectives that we're continually hearing about and we're discussing with our clients is really how do we improve our customer experiences with the different solutions that we're delivering or offering to them from a products and service standpoint. And really a critical component to improving customer experiences is being able to really understand and analyze the massive amounts of data that our organizations generate and capture in order to gain insights on our customer interactions, their behaviors, pain points, and really taking that and determining what actions should be taken to maximize our customer satisfaction. So we're going to talk about how organizations can do this. One of the things we've learned over the years is that it's simple, right? Business decisions made based on old or inaccurate data can be more costly than making decisions without any data. And this is why one of the first things we recommend towards improving customer experiences is knowing your customer. Sounds simple, but we're still seeing a lot of organizations struggling with that. And as I mentioned, to do this really well, we really need to understand our data. We need to be able to analyze it. And, especially since we're collecting it nowadays from all these different channels and touch points that we have with our customers. And so knowing our customers really requires understanding and mapping those interactions or customer journeys that they have with us in our organization. And customer journey mapping is not new, but they have become more complicated over the years due to new technologies and more channels and touch points that customers are now using to engage with us. In our digital world we live in today, customer journey maps are not as straightforward as they once were. Before there was just like point A to point B. You launch some marketing campaigns, you have some initial touch points, and you get them to point B, which is really that point of purchase. And now it's become more like this elaborate pinball game. We're bouncing from channel to channel. We're engaging with customers any time of day and night and through multiple touch points. And so making sure we have the right time or the right channel and the right time of interacting with our customers and delivering that right message has become even more critical. Which is why it's important for organizations today to really understand and develop what we call the digital customer journey map. So taking into account future technologies, the different products and services, the different channels, et cetera, is really critical. And doing so and doing it right can really actually result in high returns on marketing investments and lower your customer service costs, have higher conversion rates for you from cross-selling and upselling. But in order to achieve these results, organizations need to have the right tools to capture, analyze, and make sense of the customer data that they are capturing, which is why the relevance of the data is very key here. So most organizations we're seeing out there have some type of analytics tool or platform that they're using to analyze and report on the data they collect. However, what we're also seeing, though, is that a lot of these are just basic tools and they're only reporting on what has happened. And they help us investigate why, but it's very limited. And so in order to truly understand our customers today, organizations are having to do more. They have to get on top of these mountains of data that they're continuously collecting out there, and certainly through this wide array of channels and devices, as I mentioned. And so then they have to be able to take that data and then turn around and use this data to create compelling experiences on every channel that they're engaging with their customers to ultimately get those desired results. As I stated, there's a lot of analytics tools being used simply just to summarize and report what has happened and only helping us answer the questions that we know enough to ask. So with so much data that we're collecting on a daily basis, there's plenty of insights that our organizations don't even really know exist. And this is where we're seeing AI and machine learning really coming in to help. So I'm going to talk through an example here of how we can take the analytics types platforms that we have today and pair that with AI machine learning and help reduce customer churn as one business driver that a lot of companies are trying to solve every day. And so with AI machine learning, It can really enable an organization to sift through large amounts of data and identify all the different patterns to which customers are more likely to churn. So by uncovering customer profile attributes such as age, gender, income, campaigns that the customers are coming from, or the source of the customer, as an organization, we can actually really gain a lot of valuable insights and predict what kinds of customers are likely to churn and which ones aren't. And so one example, there's a bank that we've worked in the past, and this is one of the largest banking brands in the country here. They took AI in the analytics, and they were reviewing how customers use their IVR system as an example. One review, they found that 36% of people choosing their transaction invitation menu option were calling about check issues and fraud disputes. So by moving that option up in their call flow, the IVR could actually validate caller intent sooner and with more accuracy. And this actually helped improve the self-service rates and cut down their transfers they had. And overall, actually had a good monetary savings for them of just a little over $621,000 per year that they saved through just reduction of banker time there. They then took this model and saw the success from it and applied it to 3 more different types of scenarios there that they covered through their analytics and machine learning. And they were actually able to solve some other engagement challenges that they were having with their clients, which resulted in an additional $1.9 million in annual savings there. So this really paid off for them. And so the analytics paired with that machine learning was helping them improve their customer self-service, the delivery of the solutions the customers needed. They were able to rewrite their customer care scripts and really focus on more complex customer requests. So Glenn, if you go to the last slide for me here. And so what I wanted to do quickly is just is our prescription is really recommend, the key steps that your organization should be taking to ensure that, you have, first of all, the right plan and the right tools to understand their customer data that will enable you to take the right course of action to ensure your successes with creating customer satisfaction there. And so, step 1 is really formulating the customer experience strategy. Your organization may have this in place today, but if you don't, recommend right out of the gate, before you rush out and you start looking at investing in AI, machine learning tools to pair with your analytics, or even, look at a different analytics platform. There's a lot of customer experience and analytics platforms that are powered by AI today that are really good out there in the market. But we recommend before you rush out and make those investments that you have a clear strategy and a solid vision around that. And it's important when you're looking at that strategy and you're starting to develop that you truly map out what those key business drivers are that you're focused on trying to solve around your customer experience. So, the one I mentioned already is reducing churn and improving that customer retention. That's obviously one of the biggest ones we hear from a lot of our clients. Improving the customer engagements that you have, becoming more personalized as you're engaging with clients. There's been a lot of stats out there that the more personalized in your messaging and the services and things you offer, the greater increase in attaining new customers, or certainly retaining your existing customers. So we certainly think that's a big component of the strategy, and we can spend a lot more time on this, but I wanted to highlight that as part of your strategy as a key point. Number 2 is really, as I mentioned before, mapping and analyze your customer journeys. And so if you understand how your customers are engaging with you today and the different touch points that they're taking, and really those experiences that they're having with you, whether it's from your discovery or pre-sales to customer service you're providing them and so forth, this is really going to help you make some of those important decisions on how to improve what you're delivering to your clients out there. And again, this type of intel will help you deliver those better experiences. Number 3 is identifying and understanding your data and the quality of your data. This is probably when we're going to organizations and we're doing assessments of their readiness to support a lot of their digital transformation initiatives. Data transformation and the quality of that is certainly probably been one of the biggest Achilles heels of most organizations, and it certainly is for leveraging AI and machine learning tools. So, in the example I gave there of the customer churn, if you have a lot of duplicate data, inaccuracies and omitted information in your data there, that can really cloud your ability to discern the nature and extent of that customer churn. So we believe it's very critical, obviously, to identify and understand which data sources are the most valuable for analyze your customer experience, and then breaking that down between structured and unstructured data. We're seeing most companies have a lot of untapped, unstructured data sources, whether it's coming from your call center, voice recordings, chat transcripts, social media data sets, emails, your mobile and web interactions, et cetera. So leveraging AI machine learning to analyze your data can help you identify those patterns and pinpoint the precise reasons that customers may be looking to churn or why they're churning out there. And then actually taking the next step further and actually combining this analysis with more of your traditional structured data analysis can really help provide additional valuable insights in the context that enable you to develop this predictive models to minimize or prevent your churn. Step 4, get familiar with AI and machine learning solutions suitable for understanding your customers faster and more efficiently. There's a lot of products out there in the marketplace today. And we recognize that organizations may have a wealth of valuable data from current tools that they're using in the customer service, their sales reps and social media, et cetera, that, as I mentioned before, but most of this data fails to really reveal rich real-time customer insights. So again, by using AI machine learning paired with your analytics platform, or you go look at investing in a CX analytics platform that's powered by AI that has that built into it, really gives you the possibilities to go out and categorize and organize and analyze your customer data in real time and truly understand the customer sentiment. In this world of omni-channel customer activity we have today, machine learning and analytics is really going to be able to empower your organization to look more holistically at all your customer interactions. And step 5, deciding whether to build or buy. This is like the $1 million question here, and it really depends on your organization's maturity and budget, along with different other factors in there. But you really need to pause and take the time to assess your internal resources and decide if there's enough skills and budget to create an AI machine learning solution in-house, or if your organization is better off buying a solution. There's a lot of products that exist out there that offer this out-of-the-box capability. Some of the major cloud platforms like AWS and Azure and Google offer ML services that can be utilized to build your own platform. We've partnered with companies like Stratify that have that's a CX analytics platform that's powered by AI that can help you achieve some of these things as well. If the decision is to go out and buy it, then certainly identify solutions that you feel that are going to meet their current but also future needs. And we always recommend doing a POC, coming up with some small proof of concepts and scenarios that you can pilot quickly and really ensure that solution you're looking at or evaluating is going to truly to meet your needs there. And then lastly, step 6 is tracking and measuring success, and this goes to say with everything we do in life, right? You want to measure what you're doing and to make sure it's making achieving the objectives that you're looking to achieve there. And so, finding the metrics and the key performance indicators that you can use to track your success of your initiatives is really key on this. And, focus on those early quick wins. You don't need to boil the whole ocean when you're first looking at trying to assess all your customer data. Look at things that you can get some quick wins, make some good measurable results there. Refine as needed, especially if things fail right out of the gate. Nothing's always going to work perfectly out of the gate. So in order to build the fast momentum for future initiatives, take things slow and target some small quick wins in your POCs there. And so hopefully this information has been beneficial to you, and we look forward to talking to you in the future and how we can help you guys with some of your challenges that you may be having with improving your customer experiences. So thank you, Glenn.
Thanks, James. Our next guest is Nitin, Bhatia, another senior strategist. He actually runs our strategy team, and he's going to talk to us a little bit about blockchain and how to start to really bring that into the enterprise in the kind of very level-headed kind of way. So with that, let me switch that to you, Nitin.
Thanks, Glenn. Good afternoon, everyone. I think for the last few years, there's been a lot of buzz about blockchain technology, undeniably, and 2019 was no different, especially from an enterprise perspective. So let's start with some projections from Gartner, shall we? So this chart summarizes the roller coaster of a ride that blockchain technology has been. So according to Gartner, by 2021, 90% of the current enterprise blockchain implementations will have to be replaced because they will not be competitive anymore. So that definitely sounds reassuring. Good way to kick things off. But the fundamental sort of reason is because of the fact that the ecosystem is still very fragmented and continues to evolve. However, Gartner doesn't shy away from projecting by 2025, the business value added by blockchain will grow to slightly more than 176 billion and then magically surge to 3.1 trillion by 2030. So very similar hockey stick kind of a growth that we've been promised year after year, right? Additionally, venture capital funding for blockchain startups has reached to 1 billion or current around almost 1.5 billion in the last couple of years. IBM has invested 200 million in their blockchain-powered data sharing solution for IoT. The financial industry has spent around 1.7 billion annually on experimentation. So I could keep going with these kind of numbers, but essentially there's a lot of hype and a lot of money being invested in experimenting and playing with blockchain technology. So let's explore some of the survey data from Deloitte of over 1,300 organizations and take a closer look of what that sentiment is within the enterprise. So according to Deloitte's 2019 Global Blockchain Survey, the interest in blockchain has gone up considerably. In fact, they're claiming that the question no longer remains, will blockchain work? But it's now become, how can companies make blockchain work for them, for their specific situation? As you can see, the survey data here on the left-hand side for the first question shows that 53% of their respondents say that blockchain is now a critical priority, and that's up from like 43% in 2018. And across most of these questions, the attitude towards blockchain and distributed ledger is positive and shows sign of continued growth from 2018 to 2019. The survey also states that executives feel that the blockchain technology is now becoming broadly scalable and will eventually achieve mainstream adoption now that there is a compelling business case for blockchain. With fintech mostly leading the charge in terms of the number of blockchain initiatives, and other sectors are starting to build a similar momentum, specifically around supply chain logistics, like you can see with IBM, Maersk, Walmart, I think Nestle is in there. So there's lots of logistical companies that truly see value, which totally makes sense. You also have retail, you have telecommunication, you have government, and you have healthcare. So lots of different sectors starting to pick up steam. Companies surveyed in this particular survey have indicated that they're willing to spend around 5 million or more over the next 12 months, not couple, to explore how they can leverage the blockchain technology. So all in all, these survey numbers are all pointing towards a positive momentum, but not just within the US. It's sort of a global phenomenon at this point. In fact, countries such as China, Singapore, Russia, Israel have all doubled down on their blockchain investments based on the support that they're getting from their respective governments. The sheer amount of projects across the globe signifies the relevant value that this technology could potentially have. This level of globalization also kind of speaks to the fact of how much value we could extract from our blockchain initiatives and the efforts that have to be put into place to scale beyond just the walls of a single organization or even a single country at this point. So all of what I've covered so far sounds similar to probably what you heard last year. Still a lot of hype, still a lot of unknown around the ROI, still not as performant in certain cases, still a lot of complexity from an implementation perspective, and not to mention the constantly changing technology landscape. So how does anyone know where to start? So just within the last year, whether you look at the frameworks, the consensus models, the distributed technology, the smart contract offerings, new startups, blockchain as a service offerings, you name it, all of them have had significant growth. And while the landscape will continue to evolve to make it palatable for organizations to adopt that technology, I think there's a bigger question here, and that is the organizational change hurdles for organizations to kind of work through to get into a different mindset to really leverage blockchain. So I believe the pragmatic way to approach blockchain would be two-sided, and hence my prescriptions here. One is to realign the mindset around how we can get the best out of blockchain. For blockchain to be successful, it requires co-opetition, not cooperation, not competition, but a blend of co-opetition, meaning multiple organizations across, be it the industry or across the value chain, are working together on standards and protocols and defining them, but still competing at the product and services level. Organizations should get into a mindset of working with other organizations, be it your partners, your competitors, your suppliers, your vendors, to come together to build the standards and agree on protocols. And we're already seeing some of this happen with the formation of industry-specific or technology-specific consortiums, such as your R3, your Global Blockchain Business Council, Enterprise Ethereum Alliance, Bank Chain, TradeLens, you name it, there's a lot of consortiums. And consortiums are immensely helpful to help accelerate the learning as well as share the risks across multiple organizations. It also helps with building confidence amongst members as well as the industry in general. Today, organizations are also kind of the mindset of sharing very limited amount of data, and that data is very much in their control. They can choose what to expose, they can choose what not to expose, and they can also choose when to take that away. With blockchain, that data is now logged into this immutable ledger for participants of that blockchain to see at any given time. I think, organizations, again, from a mindset perspective, kind of fear the loss of control over that data and need to get over the hump to facilitate efficiency and gain value sort of through the value stream. And the last point on mindset is agreeing to a common set of business rules to allow organizations to build smart contracts to be able to execute without, or with, I would say, with minimal manual intervention. I don't think we're going to get to that point, or we have a long way to get to that point, but with minimal manual intervention or third parties. And that would be sort of one step closer to what folks are calling as the programmable economy, which is everything is just automatically happening with very minimal human touch points. The other side is around starting with the pain points within your organization and evaluating if blockchain technology is the right fit. Understanding the strength of the different frameworks, the distributed ledger technology, and the consensus model will help identify what type of blockchain, so be it a permissioned blockchain, be it a consortium or a public, that makes most sense for your pain points. And while we're talking about types of blockchains, I wouldn't treat these as magic pills. In many cases, it makes sense to participate in more than one type of blockchain. So for certain use cases and certain pain points, you could absolutely be in a sort of permission blockchain. In other instances, it may make sense to be in a consortium blockchain. And there are absolutely scenarios where enterprises might want to participate in public blockchain. So I would also take the opportunity to reevaluate your business model, and not in its entirety, but mostly around how you interact with organizations through the value chain. So in the value chain that you exist as your organization, how is that product going from upstream all the way down to your consumer? There are several systemic inefficiencies that are embedded in the way we do business and deliver value today. To use the blockchain technology and to get benefit off of it beyond just a beyond just using it for a decentralized database. The value chain will constantly be broken and reformed over and over as organizations figure out a new way to do business and deliver value. And lastly, I think as always, the best way to learn is to experiment and make sure that you've identified those pain points and map those pain points over to your business drivers, and then from there actually established ROI amongst other metrics to measure as you go. I think with so much in flux, it makes sense to keep these experiments simple and iterative. And I think that would be sort of a more pragmatic and a more palatable way for organizations to invest into blockchain and to not only learn sort of on their dime, but also to be able to come together with other organizations, be it participating in consortiums or creating private blockchains, and sort of learn together and form those standards together and be able to contribute in sort of a collaborative way. So those are my prescriptions for 2019 on my pragmatic approach to blockchain. Back to you, Glenn.
All right, thanks, Nitin. Blockchain continues to be one of these areas that's of a lot of interest, a lot of complexity. Still trying to have a hard time getting my head around it, but I think that helped. Our next speaker is going to be Bob Noren. He's going to talk about two topics. We're hitting certainly a lot of the emerging technologies here. We're going to talk about IoT and 5G, and where that crossover is. So with that, Bob, let me turn it over to you.
Thank you, Glenn. Again, this is Bob Noren. What I wanted to talk about today was, just as Glenn said, where 5G delivers improvements for edge, fog computing, and IoT. 5G is certainly not new to anybody. It continues to grow. Obviously, it's more than just cell phones and texting and talk and video. What I want to talk about a little bit today is what the promise is, some of the use cases, and then where we would go, where would we start to investigate how to move forward with 5G and IoT. So the promise of 5G is to be smarter, faster, more efficient than 4G. It's to deliver more mobile data with speeds up to 100 gigabits. I think that's a given. Where it's really important is IoT devices require faster response and near zero latency. They need that to reap the benefits and the promise of what they're out there to deliver, especially since the 4G network is congested today and there's latency built in, and exponentially the 5G and IoT devices are growing. The next item is hypercapacity. The speed required to deliver some of these 8K resolution streaming, 360-degree video can be delivered by 5G, while it also can be supporting mixed reality applications, improving games, viewing experiences, and also deliver these where they never could be delivered before. As far as near zero latency and reliability, near zero latency will better support and deliver mission critical use cases. But some of these are medical surgery via robots, emergency services, and autonomous driving. In terms of latency, self-driving car with 4G today would take about 4.6 feet to apply its brakes, where it would start applying its brakes under a 5G scenario within an inch, which obviously would help avoid collisions and accidents. Massive connectivity. Fully deployed 5G lets everything connect, from always-on measurement devices to new innovations in smart cities, smart homes, smart agriculture. Some of the estimations state that greater capacity will allow more devices on the network and lower energy requirements, and also be able to have up to 10 times the battery life. So as you can see, both of these elements are critical for the growth of IoT, especially as the number of devices grows exponentially. And then the last one is more intelligence at the edge. 5G has been developed to meet the needs of the industry and driving these use cases, and it can support the data and processes closer to the edge, where it can make split-second and millisecond insight-driven actions, decisions, and processes. So let's talk about some of the use cases. 5G is making it safer for driving and entertaining. The automotive and transportation industry is experiencing massive innovations. Vehicle connectivity, advanced driver assisted systems. In addition, the release and adoption of these autonomous vehicles will change the way that cars work, streets are designed, and people travel. These technologies obviously can work today, and they are starting to work today, but they'll be better with 5G. In the future, because passengers won't be required to be driving, they don't have to worry about the road. Instead, they can stream movies, show entertainment, or participate in video conference calls for work. Autonomous cars will navigate roads based on the information input by the riders, such as the destination. But they'll also pull information from surrounding infrastructure, surrounding cars, parking meters, traffic lights, and all other kinds of smart devices. 5G enables healthcare to save more lives. So just as 5G will change the way people travel in cars, the service will also create new ways for the healthcare industry and the way they deliver services to patients. The growing practice of telecommunication integrates wearable sensors, video conferencing, and more to connect primary care physicians, specialists, patients, all in different places. This means that patients in rural areas don't necessarily need to drive long distances to see a doctor. In addition, because 5G doesn't require a wired connection, more people will be able to access the network. High speed and low latency of 5G could also help first responders access high definition images of an emergency. So like a car crash, some kind of accident, taking imagery and making assessments of patient health before even arriving. One of the more common uses is also manufacturing. So 5G promises to bring greater safety and productivity to the manufacturing industry. The low latency, again, and the greater bandwidth will support smarter factory equipment, improving robots, augmented and virtual reality applications, artificial intelligence, machine learning, sensors for preventative maintenance, and production monitoring. Although some of these things are already in place, again, the more of them that are added to the network and the faster the response and the less latency will all be improved, certainly by 5G. So in preparing for 5G and IoT, here's some of the actionable steps or the prescription we would talk about. Simply waiting for the carriers to roll this out isn't enough. It's going to take time. They're rolling them out now across major cities. But enterprises have to take proactive measures to ensure that 5G networks come online and they're prepared to take advantage of what they have to offer. One of the first things is examine your organization's mission and goals. Start considering what you would do if the organization wasn't really limited by wires, slow bandwidth, and latency. So that's one thing. One of the things we do is the art of the possible. It would make sense to do the art of the possible. Think outside the box. Figure out what 5G and IoT could bring to your organization. Your 5G plan should include near-term, mid-term, and long-term development goals, making room for new use cases and devices and equipment that have not even been developed yet. So again, planning for the future. The third thing is understanding where your network is now with a network audit to determine what you need to optimize for 5G, including the potential of gaps in the network, which would require private 5G networks and or repeaters to fill in those gaps. And lastly, I think one of the things to do would be obviously to engage in discussions with the providers to see where they can deliver the services that you need. So that's what we have as far as 5G, IoT, fog, and edge computing. Appreciate your time.
Thanks so much, Bob. Next, we're going to bring in Steve Tranchida, who's our VP of Enterprise Architecture. And this is a very exciting area that's seeing a lot of growth, event-driven architecture, and it's definitely something that's coming on, and there's a lot of complexity to it. So with that said, Steve, on to you.
Awesome. Thank you, Glenn. Just to set the backdrop, I think for event-driven architecture conversation, it's really about changing the way we architect systems in sort of the new digital era, how we modernize the way that we have traditionally architected systems to align with the changing climate of business today. So, the perfect dichotomy is, this day and age, businesses are demanded to move faster. And businesses today are, they're living, breathing entities constantly changing in real time, reacting every second to events related to the business that are occurring. These events trigger highly complex processes, and more of these processes are being digitized. And so the interface that people see related to these processes are mobile apps or web apps or point of sale systems. And so as we try to do this and be more efficient and also be smarter and faster than our competition as they digitize, we have to start to think differently about how we design our systems. On the right-hand side, what we continue to see today is people trying to do everything we talked about on the left with sort of, I'll say, traditional system architectures. So when somebody asks, "Hey, we need a web app to engage with our customers," all too often I still see people say, "Okay, well, let me work on the ERD diagram for the database for that system." And so immediately we're starting to think of in terms of static data sitting at rest in tables and traditional relational tables, when actually what we're going to build is something that's going to deal with a continuous flow of information that we have to continuously analyze, react to, and get smarter on. If your organization is still primarily moving data around through scheduled batch processes and not doing that in a much more timely manner at a larger scale, that's a pretty good sign that you haven't modernized the way you're architecting systems. Nightly batches just aren't enough to handle the intelligence that we want to bake into our digital applications today. I want to know what happened 1 minute ago when I present recommendations to a customer in a digital app. Nightly batch jobs don't enable that. And then talking about scale, it's all about building massively scalable distributed systems today, as opposed to the monoliths of the past, right? And scaling both processing power and the core data capabilities in that processing. We have to start to multitask and multi-thread the processing that we do, especially for things like advanced analytics. And so getting into both synchronous and asynchronous models, as opposed to request and then sit and wait for the response models. That is the most common pattern we use today. And then, the other thing is things are changing so rapidly that building tightly coupled systems really puts a penalty on our business's ability to be agile and move fast. So getting away from point-to-point tightly coupled integrations and more turns loosely coupled, more modular integrations. All of these things will enable us to have business intelligence and reporting that is reliant on up-to-the-minute information and also can blend together current data in historical context. Those are some of the ways we need to start thinking about architecting our next generation of enterprise applications and enterprise systems in order to keep up with the changing demands of business today. One of the emerging techniques that's gaining a lot of traction out there to do just what I talked about, thinking differently about enterprise architecture, is to think about events that occur that are at the heart of our business every day. Most organizations are really defined through a series of events that occur and our ability to respond to them. And so if you look at a traditional architecture, think of a 3-tier architecture with a front-end UI layer, a middle tier, and a data layer. Where do events actually live in that architecture? And it's pretty clear that business events really aren't first-class citizens in the architecture. They really kind of live all over the place. And what we're saying is, in a modern digital organization, start to think of events as first-class citizens, and especially in how you architect systems. So what is an event? Well, a lot of us think of events as low-level things like a log entry that occurred or a security event that occurred. But think bigger. Think about events as business events, like a claim that was just made in an insurance company, a sale that was just made in a retailer, a security event that occurred, an amalgamation of things that led to a broader security event, an invoice that was generated. And for each of our industries, we can think of some very top-level kind of business-level events that occur. And we should be thinking about building our systems kind of around the flow of those events, second by second, minute by minute, hour by hour as they happen, which is a little bit of a different way to pivot our thinking. And I want to give you a couple ways we can start to do that from an architectural standpoint. Here's a kind of a simple picture of an event-driven architecture and what it could look like. The center of really an event-driven architecture is a processing engine for events that are occurring in the organization. We call that sometimes the central nervous system of a digital organization. And that's the event hub that you see in here. Now, in reality, what's in that box is a massively distributed set of nodes and clusters and things that are able to process events in the millions and multi-millions at millisecond time. And a big change here is that technology has evolved to allow us to do that and build that. It's readily available. And when we do that, when we look at technologies like AWS Kinesis, like Apache or Confluent Kafka, like the Azure streaming analytics and streaming platforms, we have the ability to build these event hubs today that can be fault tolerant, massive scale, and enable real-time data movement in our organization. Imagine an event happens such as a customer experience has just taken place. Let's say a new customer has just signed up for a service. Well, whatever entry point that customer may have used to sign up for your service, that entry point will be a publisher of a new customer event. And they will publish that event to the Event Hub along with what can be a complex data structure that encapsulates all the data that occurred with that event. So that's what an event is it's a message that gets published, and all the surrounding data around that event gets published with it. Those events are well structured. They can be highly complex. So this isn't just a name value pair. This can be complex objects. They get published to the Event Hub. And then as the producer of the event to the Event Hub, I don't need to know every single endpoint in my organization, every single person, every single system that may want to react to that event, because I don't want that tight coupling. So what I do is I publish that, and then folks that are interested in certain business events will then subscribe or listen to those events and then consume them and react to them as they occur. This starts to become a really powerful model of real-time processing in a digital organization. The other thing that can occur inside that hub or surrounding that hub is very rapid real-time transformations of data that are published with the event. So that an event occurred, it has a package of data with it. I can then write a data streaming application that processes that data and transforms it or augments the data, pulls data from a couple other systems and adds it on to the event data to make it more consumable or relevant to consumers of the data, and then republish that augmented event data back to the hub for subscribers. So this becomes a really powerful metaphor for a living, breathing, always active enterprise, as opposed to the classic comparative example is nightly batch jobs, right? There's a very big difference. So that's kind of the genesis around event-driven architecture. All of you, I'm sure, can think of a lot of really good use cases within your particular industries for event streaming and event-driven architectures. Here's a few of them just to kind of whet the appetite. Some of them are industry specific, and many of them are really horizontal things. How many companies out there are interested in maintaining in real time a complete 360-degree view of their customer? So if a CRM record changes, or a customer interaction occurred, or a customer made a different investment, and so their risk profile has changed in a financial service situation, we can maintain a real-time 360-degree view of that customer. So it's a really common use case for event streaming, given that customer data tends to live in a lot of different systems and have a lot of different interface points in an organization. So event-driven architecture can enable that. Real-time inventory management, as inventory is changing and being updated and being drawn down from, we can actually manage that. We can have predictive analytics about when I need to replenish it, when I need to put something on sale. Event-driven architecture is a great way to handle that. Certainly fraud detection, given the number of parameters that occur. You can have a transaction that occurs. You can augment that transaction data with historical context of how I usually spend money, where I usually spend money. And I'm talking about sub-second real-time type of analysis here. And so financial industries, banks are using event-driven architecture and event streaming to do a lot of real-time fraud detection. Another thing that events streaming is great for is just moving data and doing it at scale, massive quantities rapidly. So, for example, if I'm transitioning off a mainframe, or if I just want to reduce MIPS on a mainframe, then when an event occurs on the mainframe, instead of doing all the processing there as well, I can trigger an event and offload the processing, and then maybe put the result back. A bridge to the cloud. So oftentimes moving from on-prem to the cloud is a very big endeavor, and it's a gradual endeavor. And so there typically is a period of time when I have systems on-prem and systems in the cloud, and I need to keep them in sync. And I need to keep them in sync in as real time as possible. Event streaming, event-driven architecture can be a great way to enable that. So I think you get the idea. One more I'll call out here is architecturally, there's a big movement today towards microservices. And for those of you who know, microservices is about creating small, independently deployable and upgradable units of functionality that include the data associated with the functionality, the middle tier kind of services associated with that, all packaged as a deployable unit. What happens is when you go to design microservices, you start to immediately get into this dilemma of how do I break up my database into domain-specific entities that each live in their own microservice. And as soon as you break up the data, then you say, well, what happens if one microservices data repo needs data from another microservices data repo? And so event-driven can be another way to just have a real-time integration across different independent deployable components of an overall enterprise architecture. So a lot of really interesting use cases for event streaming. So if this is of interest to you, if this sounds intriguing to you, and if you haven't heard about it before, here are some prescriptions for you for how to get started. I think it always starts with a business case. And so whatever industry you're in, whatever your business objectives are, whatever you think is holding back your business or your digital experiences today, let's define some key use cases where we think this type of real-time enablement, again, high performant at massive scale, could really change the game for something you're doing as a business. So what's that value prop? What are those business cases for your specific business? Let's talk about those and think about them in terms of creating competitive advantage, whether it's internal optimization or smarter digital experiences for your customers. So defining those key use cases, I think, is critical. And then I think you need to take a hard look at how ready are you for event-driven. There's a couple lenses to that. One is, what's your enterprise architecture like today? And what's the roadmap going to be from going to that to a more enterprise-driven approach? And internally, do you have the right competencies to do that? So, do you need to plan and budget for investments in training and maybe new expertise, an infusion of new expertise into the real-time streaming technologies and event-driven designs? So the readiness phase, I think, is really critical. And then, like many of the other presenters have said, doing incremental quick wins and then building upon them is really essential here. You can establish the foundation of the event hub and establish the foundation of the architecture, but then very quickly attack a couple of those high value use cases that you defined in step one, and then continue to build that out over time once you have the foundation of event driven established. And then the only other piece that I think is really good prescriptive advice for folks looking at maybe taking this on is that, event-driven architectures are typically done with, as I said, highly distributed clusters of systems. Many folks don't have the expertise or capacity to take that on in-house. And it does take time if you do want to set it up in-house. There is an investment to do that. So the cloud can greatly accelerate event-driven architecture. I mentioned AWS and Azure at the beginning. Companies like Confluent have managed environments that they can stand up in literally minutes for you to start actually developing business solutions on event streaming platforms without having to do your own operations of those clusters and that environment. So there's certainly reasons for on-prem and roll your own and do your own infrastructure, and those are all great, and you can certainly do that. But there are also ways to get started quickly by leveraging the cloud and managed event hubs and managed event streaming services that are offered in many of these cloud environments and managed environments. Those are the prescriptions. Hopefully this has been intriguing for you in terms of how to modernize your architecture and how to enable the customer experiences that James talked about, how to enable the IoT and analysis that Bob talked about, with a little different way of architecting your systems.
All right, Steve, awesome. Yeah, another prescription would be if you do want to pursue this further, talk to Steve. He actually knows this stuff really well. I'm going to present a couple of prescriptions as well. So the first one is to focus on refreshing your mobile app portfolio. We see this time and again, like there's a number of companies who have built and deployed dozens of apps to your workforce, to your customers, and you're getting some really good value out of that. But we definitely see that one of the challenges with this is that they're taken on as projects, right? So and you may have started at the beginning by trying to come up with a whole bunch of different ideas that you can take forward, and you chose a few, and you kind of built those. But because they're often tied to some other larger project, they're kind of built once and then they're kind of left on the side. So maybe you're still doing a few things with regards to bug fixes and maybe some updates for APIs that you found out have been deprecated by Apple or Google along the way. But not a whole lot of extra work that's been done. So definitely one of the first things that we say that you should do is take a look at the list of apps that you already have, and then start to really take a fresh look at, all right, what's my adoption looking at for these? What's the usage? To that point of some apps don't get all the care and feeding that they might require. Look at the last major release date. Like, how long is it since you really spent a lot of time here? I mean, I have to tell you that, I've recently worked on a couple of clients where, some of the UX design is from really like iOS 5 and 6. And here we are, 8 versions later. And there's a little surprise of why isn't the uptake, why aren't people using this as much as they should? It has all these great features. So, that's, one piece of it. And then the other is that a lot of times, there are mechanisms to try and bring ideas into the pipeline of what else should we be doing. Hopefully you have a good governance to ingest those and to prioritize them going forward. But a lot of times it's still worthwhile, if you haven't done this in a number of years, is to set up an opportunity to really canvas the entire organization again. Business processes change, products and services change, the platforms that we work on change. So take this higher level opportunity to do a little bit of ideation, and speak to all different layers and segments across the business to try and come up with a new list, rather than just what happens to come in through the transom. Like, put some effort into this. And then once you have that, go through a process to kind of score each of these ideas as to which ones provide the most value, which ones are really tied to some other initiatives that maybe someone else is thinking of that are kind of higher level, and then reprioritize those and put some fresh eyes on it. So that's really just at like the overall portfolio level. So then the next piece is, all right, so I've identified that maybe there are apps I really haven't touched in a while and probably too long ago. So refresh those neglected apps. It could be a good 4 or 5 years till someone really re-looks at something, and because maybe we upgraded to a different version of an ERP, and now it's time to upgrade yet again, and that's the time when someone's going to take a look at it. But outside of those larger project processes, take some time to re-look at these apps if you've seen that there's been 2 or more years since you've spent time updating those apps. And again, maybe you've done some bug fixing, maybe you've pulled forward a couple of additional features that were on the original backlog that didn't make it to that first release. And if so, kind of good for you. I hope you're continuing to do that. But I think that there's more that can be done. For each of these, the same way that maybe you kicked off that project to try and understand what is it that we want to do, what do we want these applications to provide to the different users, run this again, like that same kind of process. Take a step back. Let's look at the user behavior. Like, when we launch products, and I consider mobile apps that we're building to support our business processes to be products, how are the users using them? Are they using them the way that we anticipated when we built them in the first place? What has changed? Talk to some of those users again and try and understand how well is this working for you? What are the things that are missing? Also, take an opportunity to think about re-engineering the entire business process that you built this application around. We've got all these cool new things that we're starting to incorporate into our businesses, like IoT and machine learning and microservices, bots, the event-driven architectures. What does that allow us to do now? Like, we built these apps several years ago based on the constraints of several years ago. So there's a lot more that maybe we can do today. So take a fresh look at, if we were to continue moving forward with this app, what might we do very differently that could improve the user experience, improve the value that is providing to the users, the accuracy and the timeliness of the information, how productive they can be, and get started. If you need to prototype something or build a proof of concept around, how do we now integrate bots or voice, we haven't done that before, or machine learning, if that's new to the organization, run those prototypes and then actually go build it. But I've seen many times where these apps just sit out there, and it's really a disservice to the users and to the effort that you made the first time in building these applications if you don't really continue to relook at what's possible. So there's the first prescription for me. Take a look at these older apps, take a look at your portfolio, treat it like a portfolio, and make some progress and delight your customers and the employees that are using it. So the next one is use your AI superpowers for good, not evil. There is a moral side to this conversation, but it's not always just morals, and we'll get to that, like a moral conversation to have here. What I'm saying here is try and take the opportunity when you're building machine learning algorithms and making that part of your business to take the time and care to try and remove any bias that might either be in the thoughts around the design of the thing that we're trying to apply machine learning to, or if we have existing machine learning algorithms and projects that we've created, take another look to make sure that we're not implementing bias and into that process. So, like, we know that bias is real, and there are all these things on the right here that are different features that are related to bias, race and gender and religion. Like, these are the ones that we think of. This is where the moral side of this can come from. And this bias is built up over time by the people who work for the company today, who have worked for the company for the last 50 years. So we all have our own mental models based on personal experience of how we do certain things. It's like, after a while, that, hey, if someone lives in this town or in this zip code, that the chance that car insurance rates may end up being very high just because we see that there's a lot of accidents that happen here, or a lot of the people that have been our customers for a while are. But as neighborhoods change, so might the statistics. But if you start with this inherent bias that no matter who comes from that zip code or any of the other attributes about that person, they're still going to get a higher rate than if they were 2 towns over. So spend some time there. There's actually also a lot of regulatory concern and trying to get transparency over how those models are built, so that we can just in general, we're trying to pull that out. But it's something that we need to think about. Again, because all these models are programmed by people, we might use machine learning where we think we're making faster decisions and better decisions, but what we might be doing is making these biased decisions faster. And because now they're applied without individuals being able to intervene and saying, what, that decision doesn't make sense to me, it just gets institutionalized, and you sort of start to lose control that having people involved directly in a process can come in and intervene with. So let me just talk about an example that's maybe not morally an issue, but still has to do with bias based on something like gender. So here's an example of a model that was supposed to predict tumors and try and catch cancer early on. And so someone came up with the initial version of the model. And if you look at recall rate, which is how many of the positives did we actually capture, and then precision rate of how accurate were the predictions in total, this doesn't look too bad as a first pass. So we got a recall rate of 80%, precision rate of about 75%. So we really seem to be on the right track when we look at the 1,000 people that we had in this universe, at first, which were evenly split between male and female. However, when we start to dig into the metrics based on gender, we find that for women, this performs really well. We've got a recall and precision rate of over 90%. That's great. That means that this is working really well for diagnosing these tumors in female patients. Now, you start to look at this from what's the numbers if you just look at the male population, and all of a sudden, this doesn't seem to be so good anymore. We're only capturing half of the actual patients who had the tumor, and then from a precision perspective, we've incorrectly predicted a third of the cases of the ones that we thought were positive cases. So for men, this algorithm that we have is not working. So somewhere in the algorithm, there is a bias from a gender perspective. Not a good, bad, but just how well is it performing? So this is another reason why you need to really think about it. So the prescription here, because a lot of people are starting to invest in machine learning, as you're doing this, spend some real time to try and remove bias from the machine learning algorithms that you're creating and these initiatives. Look at your training sets. Is there skew in the data? Do you have enough representation of different outcomes and different types of attributes? Maybe you might find running some experiments that there are features that are missing entirely from the algorithm in trying to come up with the right outcomes. And then it could also be that the weighting, or feature significance is probably the technical term, but the relative weighting that you're putting on certain features is at the wrong proportion, and therefore that's giving you not the optimal answer. So definitely take some time. There are some tools to consider around helping you with this. FairML is one. Google What If. IBM has their bias assessment toolkit. There's a lot of places to look at this, but because of the amount of effort that's being put into machine learning and the potential value that we can derive from it from an organizational perspective, we should also be spending the right amount of time and care to make sure that the results are being applied equally to everyone who we're putting this machine learning against. And then the last one is to invest in intelligent automation. Automation is growing significantly. Most of it is done under RPA or also RDA for desktop and assisted automation. First of all, this is really only like a 5-7-year-old term, as RPA, and the growth is good. And you can see that there are a number of companies that have come forward. I mean, there's about 60% or so, have begun automation, but less than 10% are really operating at scale, where they've got 51 different automation streams going at once. So there's still a lot to be done, and I think that there's a lot of potential here. But a lot of what's been realized hasn't gone maybe quite as far as we have the potential to do. And I think that there's a lot more. Like a lot of what has been done from an RPA perspective, but a lot of what we've gotten good at is just moving files and data quickly without people having to do it. So someone calls up and they want to sign up for, to be a customer or for a product or a service. Oftentimes that data that comes in needs to update a whole bunch of different systems. And while that used to be either a batch process or a very manual intensive process, now we can set up automation that allows us to automatically populate all of those systems, and vice versa, as there are changes that happen elsewhere. And that's really good. It saved a lot of time, and we're able to accomplish more with the same number of people, but we haven't really done anything different. We're just doing it faster. Now, increasing efficiency and reducing costs are awesome. And a lot of times from an IT organization perspective, that's sometimes how we are viewed. Like, how are you helping me increase efficiency and reduce costs with technology? But that doesn't mean that we're doing as much as we can to try and rethink just fundamentally, how are we doing the things that we do now that we have all these other new tools? There may be better and different ways that we can do what we do. And that's where, the technologists and we can really help the business move forward and get meaningful gains that, not only maybe affect the bottom line, but the top line. This is the prescription here. Really start on this path towards more intelligent automation. So number one, kind of think bigger. We always talk about trying to find quick wins, and definitely, as we're standing up technologies, that is absolutely something that should be a goal. But when we try and look for quick wins, we look for these small improvements that we can make. And sometimes that is good to try and get our hands around the technology. But other times, when we're selling a new technology like RPA, I think that we talk about all the things that we could possibly do, and especially when the representatives from the different companies like Automation Anywhere or Blue Prism come in and they're making the presentations to the business and to the rest of the IT leadership. They're talking these very grand plans, but then we start very small. So I would say that we should be also, as stewards of bringing in RPA, we should also canvass the organization to understand what are the big digital transformation initiatives that are going on. What are we trying to solve? And then start to think about where we can try and inject RPA into those initiatives and start to add value and make bigger impacts. So that's something where you almost have to step back and take a look at it that way. Secondly, don't look at RPA just on its own, just like as its own little technology. When you start to think about the phrase intelligent automation, it is what else can you bring into leverage RPA with? So we've got machine learning algorithms that might say that, all right, someone puts in an application for a mortgage, on the website, then we can use machine learning to quickly evaluate whether or not they qualify. And, kind of like what Quicken does with loans, or Rocket Mortgage, where you can get a response in minutes, right? So that's something that, that you can do so that now you can start to get the paperwork going like right away, or, turn on the credit card right away type of thing. All of these things are also events. So Steve talked about event-driven architectures, and he talked about microservices. Start pulling all of this together, and you can create a lot more powerful capability with RPA than if you just did RPA alone and you're just trying to replace manual processes with the same exact process, but just faster and without human intervention. As part of that, take a fresh look at this business process that we're trying to address with RPA. So again, don't just try and apply RPA to do the same job without the individual involved. Look at RPA as, all right, if I have this, what are the different triggers? How can I maybe redesign the process, in a way that's going to be better overall? Business process redesign mobile's been really great for that. I think that this is another area where you should be looking at trying to change how you do work, not just change the tools. And then the last thing is think about how you communicate your organizational impact of bringing in RPA. So a lot of people, when they think of it, and not just because of the name of robotic process automation, but it's always about any type of automation is the first thing that people are going to think about is my job in peril? Am I going to be replaced by my new robot overlord? But you also have human-assisted automation with RPA. So think about how are roles going to change? It's not just that maybe we can generate more capacity out of the same 100 people in the call center, but what else can they do? And how do we maybe allow those people to add more value in the process and make them feel better about this change that's coming and the role that they're going to have and the opportunity that they're going to have? And then along the same lines, think about any retraining and reskilling of your workforce based on that we brought RPA in. Like, what else do they need to understand? And if their roles are changing, how are we going to assist them to acclimate to kind of the new reality? Just from an organizational development perspective, you want to make this viewed as a positive change for everyone in the organization, not just the folks in the C-suite who see how maybe their stock options are going to increase as a result of reducing costs. So that's what I've got for you on RPA and intelligent automation. I'd like to just open it up to the group for questions to any of us and any of the different topics that we've covered today. Okay, yeah, so there's a question from John and Bob. Maybe you might want to jump in on this one. Regarding 5G, if and when do you believe it will replace home Wi-Fi, or will it just be for IoT?
Well, it really depends on the application, right? So in some areas where they're rural or they just don't have the resource, I think it will be the thing, right? It's not just for IoT and fog computing, although because of the congestion out there, it's going to assist with those. But really depends on where you are and what's available and what the app is, right?
Yeah. And also, John, I'll try and see if I can find the article, but I did read something recently where it is being looked at as, because of the amount of bandwidth and because of the speed, as a way to replace Wi-Fi. And I think not just maybe in the home, but I think that there's the potential, like for private 5G networks, which you can add on and create because the base stations don't need to be quite as large as the giant towers that we're used to. That's being looked at.
I think it also depends on the device, because there's an awful lot of devices out there that don't support the newer technology, and there's always that danger of moving forward and what you leave behind.
Very true.
This is Roman. I was just going to throw out something that I've talked to a couple of companies about. In the past, we used to use, for small business locations, we used to use either T1s or maybe broadband cable or whatever for interconnectivity. And then there was always a question of what do you use for backup when that fails. So a lot of companies are waiting for the 5G to put in either 5G as a backup or a complete replacement for T1 or cable to small locations, to small business locations. Allstate, for example, has 13,000 agency locations. McDonald's is thinking about it, a number of other companies.
I think it's a great idea for a backup, assuming that it's available in your area, right?
Right. Well, that's starting it as a backup and then looking at it eventually as a total replacement for maybe using cable as the backup.
Might end up being a lot cheaper too. Anyone else? I thought I heard someone start.
Hi, Glenn. This is Riaz. You talked about fundamentally rethinking what we're doing with RPA tools. And I know you gave that mortgage decisioning example. Can you think of any other scenarios or examples that you've seen of what people are doing with RPA beyond just the traditional efficiency gains?
Part of the challenge is that there's not that many people doing things dramatically different. I saw a stat that said that 90% of RPA is really sort of, more the robotic desktop. It's being used primarily in call centers still, kind of not on its own for the back office stuff. And it's just perpetuating, the same processes. So, and the fact that there's conflation between, like RDA has now been subsumed under the larger RPA umbrella is, I think, some of the challenge. And a lot of where I've seen it used has been more on that call center side of things, because that's sort of where it started, right? With like the outsourcing companies saying that, when they're getting pressured to reduce their costs for doing the same back office processes, fine, I'll start to use RPA and we'll do all this value add stuff and we'll be able to reduce our costs. And that's where it started. And I think that that's largely where it still is.
Yeah, no, makes sense. We're utilizing it certainly for a lot of back office. I thought you offered an interesting perspective on looking at some experiences as well. So I was just curious, but thank you.
Last call. Okay, is John just asking a follow-on question on 5G of rolling out in urban areas versus rural? Like, where is that going to happen first?
They're all doing experiments in certain places. I can tell you in Illinois and Wisconsin, Madison, Wisconsin is a test bed for 5G. And Illinois is looking really, really hard to do central and southern Illinois as a state initiative. The problem is no vendor has come forward to help them with that part in Illinois.
That definitely makes sense and is not surprising. I mean, I definitely see Madison because of the school, like, and, how do things work at the stadium when there's 75, 80,000 people there. And I can definitely see why the larger cellular providers are focusing on more urban areas first because of the density of the population, where they have greater coverage and bandwidth challenges, and it's easier to have more subscribers in a particular area to make that investment pay off faster. Okay, guys, I appreciate everyone's time, and we will see you guys next time. I also want to say a thank you to Steve and Bob and James and Nitin for their participation today and their point of view.
And thank you, Glenn, for that great roundtable and for running the Emerging Tech Council. And for anybody that's interested in joining the Emerging Technology Council, just go to emergingtechcouncil.com for more information. All right, thanks for hopping on to another episode of the Modern Digital Enterprise, the digital transformation podcast from Anexinet, part of the Anexinet Podcast Network. Bye-bye, everybody. Take care.
We'll see y'all.